There are no meaningful surprises at the Oscars, but the presence of octogenarian Jerzy Skolimowski was perhaps unexpected this year, bringing with him EO, a film we saw in Brussels last year, a Bressonian fable of human cruelty seen through the eyes of a little donkey. And now the BFI is running their own retrospective on Skolimowski. They've called it Outsiders and Exiles. Skolimowski is really both an outsider and exile. In 1967, Hands Up, a film, would lead quite literally to his ejection from his homeland, depicting as it did, or exploring as it did really, in a kind of allegorical way, a response to these Stalinist purges and Stalinist terror. He's led what you might favourably call an interesting life: amateur boxer, jazz drummer, stuntman, actor, filmmaker. Even now at 80, he bristles with bigness. Big guy. There's something very cool about Jerzy. So what we're going to do this week is to explore really only his early cinema, his Polish cinema, his new wave cinema.
With reference to some of the later works which we have seen, which we're aware of.
Yeah, we will contextualize them with later films, but our kind of locus is going to be the early stuff, all of which are films that he alludes to actually as being slightly disappointing. But they are really mesmeric, visually arresting, experimental, effortlessly, that's not even a word anymore, inventive. For your themes, there's alienation, drifting, erotics without actual fucking, and I think consumerism, consumer society, class, status. His protagonists, acted both by himself and the likes of Jan Nowicki, are oddballs who rub the wrong way against their times. We're talking identification marks None, Walkover, Barrier, Les Départs, Hands Up, obviously, and Deep End. And with Hands Up, that was a film that was, made in 1967 and released eventually in 1981, where it screened out of competition at Cannes. He was, or is, a contemporary of Wyder, mates with Polanski. But maybe, Ralph, he's not always considered among the top tier of Polish filmmakers. Is that fair to say? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, he's had a strange career meandering from these severely underrated Polish films to a kind of what would in the 70s have been considered prestige works. I guess this folk horror with Alan Bates called The Shout, was probably his most in its time critically successful film. It won the Grand Prix at Cannes, and I think it was positively reviewed at the time, and it had big stars.
Tim Curry as well.
Tim Curry, yeah. And Jim Broadbent. And
playing an absolute psychopath. Yeah. Beautiful performance by Jim Broadbent, actually.
Yeah, I think he lived in LA for many years. He made a lot of different kinds of films, and I think EO, I mean, to get our more detailed thoughts on that, obviously, as you said, you listened to our podcast about it when we saw it at the New Horizons Festival in Wrocław. But that is fortunately a film of a director who hasn't gone stale, a director who's still asking questions about what a film can be. It's a very inventive work. I personally didn't really love it and bristled against its various idiosyncrasies.
I felt it was a barnstormer. I think obviously the lens people saw it through was this is a kind of hyper pop rock opera reinterpretation of Bresson. And for if you're a deep cut Bresson stan, that's going to bristle with you. I don't have a problem with that. I think as a remixing of Bresson through the lens of like hyper modernity and hyper modern forms of visual storytelling, it was really interesting. It's not an all timer, but I think it's, for an 80-year-old knocking this out, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm impressed by him and his exploits. I just found it to be like ugly and a bit kind of
moments of beauty.
Yeah,
but it wasn't striving for beauty. I don't think.
Yeah, I have an issue with things that don't strive for beauty, I guess. And what's so fascinating with these early works is that they have a grace and a beauty and a fluidity of motion. I think we need to talk about Orson Welles when we talk about Skolimowski.
Yeah, I think we do.
You were talking before about obviously how Orson Welles famously started in the theatre, and he put Greg Toland, the DOP of Citizen Kane, on the same title card as him. Citizen Kane, his debut film, because he felt he owed so much to Greg Toland in terms of like teaching him about visual language. And Greg Toland famously said to Orson Welles, "I wanted to work with you because you didn't know what wasn't possible." And there's something about a kind of a naivety and an inventiveness, a kind of a wunderkind. I don't know what these sort of phrases about, but he a fresh voice who basically had loads of was full of visual ideas and cared enough about, and maybe it's easier in the Polish context, but cared, in a lot of contexts, the narrative propulsion and dramaturgy take precedent over spectacle.
Yeah.
And I think what's as a director on a film set, sometimes you have to fight quite hard to make sure that people remember, we're making a film. Things have to not just look pretty, but be
they need to
have momentum.
And not momentum, but they need to have a sense of space. And I think this is something that this is like the Wellesian linkage. And I know, like in the last 6 months, we've been like making these Wellesian parallels a lot, but I think Skolimowski is a director who does seem in a lineage of Welles, maybe not intentionally as he would see it, but there is a sense of using space and depth and time to do a lot of the heavy lifting in his stories, because the stories are often quite fragmented. He jump cuts often, they are non-linear, and it's particularly true of these early films. They tend to unfold as fragments in a hero's journey. I mean, that's particularly true of Identification Marks None. It was his debut film. It was really sort of 3 films stitched together, and you can kind of tell where you can see the suture marks of that. But it involves a lot of jumping. But when you look at a film like Barrier is a film that will sort of flow between kind of naturalistic conversations and then suddenly depart into quite abstract ensemble pieces that are very, very much feel fitting for the stage in a way, but still retain a real like vigorous filmic formal language. We can go into specifics in a bit, but I think maybe the film that is the most conventional of these is probably Walkover,
which he made between those 2 films. It was
between
his
those 2 films, it's probably his most, as it were, conventional. But even then, there's a real attunement to space and depth, and there's still a kind of frisky, fizzy fizziness to it, which is what excites me about when watching these early films, is this intense coolness about it. And you can draw parallels with Godard and Bout de Soufflé, the kind of the birth of filmic cool. But actually, Bout de Soufflé isn't that cool. It's received as being very cool, but the actual experience of watching Bout de Soufflé is not that cool. It's a very anomic and kind of languid film that's very aware of its struttingness, I think.
And it's sort of debt to American cinema or genre cinema.
Whereas this really isn't. I think there's something very anarchic and very farcical about early Skolimowski, and it's very fun to watch him.
Well, I mean, I didn't come here to denigrate Godard.
I would never
obviously.
neg Godard. Come on.
But yes, you're right. Those early films are very much about a relation to cinema and looking and being looked at. Whereas Skolimowski has a much more spontaneous energy,
more amateurish in a way. It comes
more
from
amateur.
amateurism,
There's a kind of beautiful amateurism to it, if one can use that word in a non-pejorative way. I feel like the spirit of whether directly or indirectly, the spirit of another Jerzy Skolimowski, the theatre practitioner, looms large in these works because the way, and this is sort of true of any of the Polish films of that era that have probably any of them at all, but it's in the water. The way that actors move, the spontaneity. The way that
particularly
kind of
true of Skolimowski, maybe.
Very true of Skolimowski and or Żuławski, I suppose. All these, we're saying all the names wrong, I'm sure. But the way that actors kind of respond to the present moment in this, and it happens particularly in Hands Up, which we just watched, which is the fourth of these 4. You've got Resopsis, Identification Marks None. You've got Walkover, which is just called Walkover. Barrier, which is called Barrier, and then Reche de Gori
Hands Up. There's also Le Départ.
This film with Jean Pilet, which is
yeah.
almost like a Carry-On style farce about a car racer played by Jean Pilet.
A young criminal who is in efforts to. He's signed up to participate in a race. He signed up to race with a Porsche, I believe, and he loses access to the Porsche. So he spends a lot of the film trying to acquire a car in which he can race, and it will no doubt bring him fame and fortune.
It has brilliant Skolimowskian touches, but it spends far too much of its energy trying to be something which is not, which is a French New Wave film.
Yeah, it's basically it's kind of like an appendage to the New Wave.
But it has a weird sort of slapstick humor, which I quite like. But it's not.
It doesn't stand out for me. I found it pretty, not hard going. I just found it pretty uninteresting. I kept pausing it and kind of doing chores and shit while I was watching it. But
there's something about the parade, the spontaneity, the fact that all these films feel a bit like a dream as well, which I think is something quite special.
Yeah, you are kind
like
of
8.5. You're moving between lots of different situations, all of which have extraordinary like visual memorability, whether it's people going down slides. Almost all of these films, I think all 4 of these films have moments where people are either jumping off trains or jumping onto trains, or Hands Up is like entirely set on a train that is like moving and stopping. And it's obviously an extremely good shout to no pun intended, because we didn't like the shout.
No.
But it's an extremely good shout to use trains if you're making a film, because trains are extremely cinematic and are, of course, evoke the first film.
Lumiere. Well, not the first film, one of the first films.
One of these first films. But yeah, he uses the trams in Barrier. Should we hone in on Barrier?
Well, I think one thing it's worth saying is, a lot of his films concern sort of young people who are on the cusp of adulthood, often university graduates or people nearing the end of their formal education, who are confronting the realities, as it were, of the adult world. They are often drifters, or there will be the protagonist will be a drifter, a loner, somebody who doesn't quite know what they want, and is a bit of a prankster as well. I think that's one thing. They play, they act, they are insincere.
They're almost like Jackass style tricks. I mean, Barrier starts with this amazing
really defamiliarizing little game, and I think
starts with someone's back. I think the opening shot is this amazing fleshy, and of course it works so well in black and white. Almost all of his best films are in black and white. And they're bent over and their hands are tied behind their backs, and they're trying to pick out a matchbox with their mouths, I believe.
They're trying to pick it with their mouth. And what you see at the very beginning is you see this body just dip and fall out of shot against a grey screen. So and this happens several times, and you see hands kind of intrude. There's a conversation in the background about which, and I think this is a thing I noted about some of these films, is they use kind of popular idioms and political dogma. People say the youth are the future of the country and things like that. People say these kind of the assertions, which I found a lot like reading someone like Andrei Platonov in Russian, who uses a lot of these kind of cut-up style and uses like newspaper clippings and dogma and doggerel in his literary work, and it feels like Skolimowski is doing that here. These bodies are dipping off this thing, and then only slowly does the game reveal itself. But even then, it doesn't make sense really. It's this great moment of kind of this strange circus act almost, which obviously has really specific, cogent rules to the people playing it, but to the viewer is completely incomprehensible.
Yeah, and it's another device. I mean, it is almost like that horrible phrase people use, art for art's sake. There are loads of moments. I guess identification marks. None is the most direct of this, just simply because it was several, as you said, several student films stitched together, and it has this. Almost every shot is a kind of very well composed set piece that is very deliberately arranged the way it's arranged, so that you see a silhouette of someone, you see someone's shadow projected really well, you see someone's reflection upside down, you see like multiple things happening at once. Very well composed. He immediately just arrives and says, this is my idiom, this is how, I mean, even the opening shot of Identification Marks 1, he's lighting a cigarette, it's a black screen, he lights a cigarette, he's lit up, the cigarette goes, the lighter goes out, and you're back in black, and then the light is on again, and it's like this. There's a bit in Hands Up we just watched where a white tablecloth is kind of folded away with all the glasses scrunched and smashed in it. The tablecloth is kind of pulled upwards out of frame, and then you're left with a black screen. So he works with everything is always made for the light, the chiaroscuro of the frame,
which makes it, because why he's such a natural black and white. And I think one of the things you mentioned, about identification marks, none. It's broadly a film about a man sort of vaguely trying to avoid military service, pretty much like draft dodging. But there's a great set piece in the center where three friends meet at a cafe, talk, and then basically like ogle women walking past. A thing which has been depicted in hundreds, if not thousands, of films over the years. It's my favorite iteration of this like trope. Just for its sheer visual inventiveness. Again, it kind of is a bit arts for art's sake, but it captures something about youth, I suppose, and the youthful gaze, because it is so energetic. And one amazing thing is the countertops of this cafe are glass. So the camera kind of tilts down, and suddenly you see everyone looking up. There's suddenly lots of hands moving over the table, moving coffee cups, cigarettes, passing cigarettes and money around. There's lots of passing things in this film. People pick up a thing, drop it, someone else grabs it, someone takes it off them. And then the camera kind of pans backwards and spins around the cafe on the inside to track this woman, and then spins around and comes back to the people, the three friends sitting there arguing. There's a constant burble of conversation. It's such a visually intoxicating way to film, to inject a freneticness into a scene, because it captures something about these young characters who are full of fucking energy, but actually have nothing better to do than drink coffee and watch women walk past a window. So it neatly embodies this idea of like, sort of barely sublimated social, sexual, political energy, which is again what makes this film so cool and so small p political, I think, about youth generations in Poland in the 60s. But let's talk about Barrier, because we made it a little way into Barrier and then we got sidetracked, which is what happens with Skolimowski.
Yes, I mean, Skolimowski's films are about sidetracking. I guess we set the scene with I mean, I can barely remember what Barrier is even about. It has extraordinary architectural flourishes.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you what happens in Barrier.
Give us this little
it's about a man. So the game they're playing at the beginning is to determine who will, of this group of friends, who will seize the a pot of collected money they've saved up during their university course. He gets it. He then roundly admonishes all his friends for being really consumerist and only interested in cars and success and wealth. And they all decide that they hate him. It's brilliant. And then he just kind of goes off and he bumps into some fitty by the side of the road who happens to be a tram driver. He basically says, you should pretend to be my wife for this meal I've got to go to. And a lot of the film is him kind of them just making their way to this meal at a restaurant and this party. But there's not even anyone waiting for him when he gets to this restaurant, and it's this kind of love affair. And then at the end, they have a kind of reunification at a party, and he throws himself in front of her tram. So it's kind of a love story, not to die. She stops the tram, but there's a kind of love. It's really his most complete love story in a way. It has a happy ending for a Skolimowski film, but that's the framing. It's a journey. It's like Salan. It's like a long, dark journey into the night, basically, which throws up all of these other questions. It's
a very youthful quest for status, or quest to sort of understand one's relationship to status. It stars Jan Nowicki, who is just one of the most extraordinary actors ever, I think.
And a deep Grotowskian.
I would imagine so. And he worked with Wojciech Has. He's in Hourglass Sanatorium, a film which not everyone agrees with me.
One of our most popular episodes, actually.
Oh, it's true. Actually, people really like. Tune in to our episode where we disagree a little bit about Hourglass Sanatorium, a sort of classic Polish fantasy film by Wojciech Has, which stars Jan Nowicki in a similar role. I think perhaps as I mature, I prefer him in Barrier than in Hourglass. But yes, it's playing that same role of a man, sort of in a swirling kind of vista of strangeness, oddity, kind of impervious to the rationale of what's going on, but not kind of totally rejecting it either. At times confused and charmed by the way of the world. I mean, he's a perfect kind of a perfect stand-in for the viewer. He's a perfect kind of protagonist.
Yeah, there's an indeterminacy about Skolimowski film, which is that he doesn't reveal motivation for characters. You know, we're used to characters having a quest or a mission and it being clear. You know, even Tarkovsky with, you know, Stalker, the objective of Stalker is very clear. The stakes are very clear in Tarkovsky. With Skolimowski, they're not. There are there's a section where he goes to trade for a sword, goes to this apartment of this woman, and it's this strange kind of large, austere house where she at first mistakes him for a cleaner. And he kind of goes along with it. And there's a lot of going along with it for the bit. He kind of buys this sword. He agrees to have a bath in the house and she kind of tries to seduce him. He rejects her. But there are these amazing moments of intimacy. Or not intimacy, but like kind of what presumably would be kind of crossed barriers. You know, people get in, his characters get into these kind of bizarre situations whose kind of outlines are never really sketched or filled in. They just get into situations and they're often a great kind of excuse cinematically to create quite an arresting, memorable scene. So there's a power cut in that. And he's in the bath in the dark and she enters with a candle and a kind of negligee. And it, you know, there's an element where it's farcical and sexy, but it's not. It's actually filled with a real ominous existential angst almost. And he's very good at that. And he's amazing at kind of concocting out of nothing. You know, there's a scene where he goes to give blood. In a blood drive, and he's standing by a wall next to these pipes which a man is fixing. Why is a man fixing a pipe? You know, these pipes which seem to be serving nothing, and why are there loads of pipes in a blood bank? And all these men suddenly shuffle past, loads and loads and loads and loads of them. He loves using big ensembles, loads of people moving backwards and forth. There is an incredible sense of ensembles and blocking in his films where, like, I think you pulled out a good example from Hands Up because it's shot on a train carriage. Do you want to talk about that use of that kind of vertical envelope, maybe?
Yes. So, I mean, one of the great things about framing is that you can change the aspect ratio just by having darkness on either side. It's almost like a TikTok frame you get in this film, Hands Up, and it's just about the barriers, the doors of this train, this freight carriage that they're in for the whole film, and it frames various people in this sort of rectangle, in this portrait rectangle. It's just very. It's not mannered. I mean, maybe some people might think it's mannered, but it's just very deliberate and conscious efforts like that to compose things well. But you know, you get it in Kurosawa, you get it in anyone who's sort of certainly in Fellini, you get it in anyone who's serious about cinematic space. And I don't think you get. I mean, Walkover is maybe the one that has the most like raw human energy because he's drawing on his experience as a boxer and he's playing this boxer who's competing and it has these not chase sequences but fast. A lot of the time there are quite long takes where the camera follows him running and then running up a building, and the zoom and the compositions there are a bit more kind of frenetic.
Well, even at one point,
but they're still composed.
Off a moving train, so you get a shot from a moving train. It's a very iconic scene, which Jerzy Skolimowski, because we went to the screening of Walkover. At the
so this was a bit disappointing. I was already primed for this sort of elder abuse kind of atmosphere. When there's a foreign director in London, an older director, often I feel that when there's a Q&A, there's a sort of feeling of a certain kind of bonhomie that makes me feel a bit nauseated, because you know that the directors and critics don't, or directors and programmers don't think the same way, and I just knew Skolimowski wasn't going to sort of play ball in terms of illuminating his work. But
No.
it was particularly. We didn't go to the actual kind of in conversation event. It was like a whole evening of him talking. But we did go to the screening of Walkover, which had an introduction by him, specifically because I was already aware. I'd seen Walkover and Barrier before, and I was aware that this era of his films was the one we wanted to focus on. So we went to the screening. He gave this. He didn't introduce it. A program I introduced it, but then at the end, he gave this interviewed I think fairly well by Maheli from Second Run, who will be distributing these
DVDs. Yeah,
these Blu-rays of these two films, Walkover and Barrier. But he was just giving these crap answers. All he really said was, "Oh, I haven't watched this film for a long time, but I'm very proud of the jump that I make from the train."
And it's really impressive.
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, I guess it's quite a Chad answer, quite a jock answer, but I felt it was sort of underselling himself. It almost felt like he'd sort of lost touch with. I mean, maybe it was just, maybe all of this dynamism that you get in these early films was just sort of an intuition for him. But they're clearly some of the most exciting films of their era, precisely because of this meticulous and energetic and vibrant blocking and contrast and
but I think there's an element where he was giving kind of Chad answers. I assume he's pretty tired or whatever. And also there's a weird thing about being invited to your own retrospective, because it probably feels like being invited to your own funeral a little bit. And maybe you would look back and people are kind of celebrating these films in your 60s and you're sitting there thinking, my youth has fled. But he seemed most excited to talk about the boxing and the jumping off the train. He seemed less interested formally in the films. He kind of gave the impression that he felt they were quite amateurish, which they are in a lot of ways, but they are really exciting. And there's a lot, I think that it's a discredit to his own filmmaking to imply that they're slapdash. There are certainly slapdash filmmakers who have tons of ideas, but formally shaky. Parajana, for example, a really good example of that. But yeah, I mean, the films are full of extraordinary uses of depth. Often something is happening in the background, the middle ground, and the foreground, all of which help tell the story. There's a great scene in Identification Marks None, where Jerzy Skolimowski, his character, his alter ego, goes into a language learning center, and he picks up the phone, and there's this whole kerfuffle about him having to wait to use the phone, and it's a very classic Skolimowskian thing where there's sort of like someone else needs to use it and they're kind of banging on about there's a sort of unexplained rule that's holding play, kind of sitting over the situation. He eventually gets through and he talks to his mum on the phone. There's a window behind him and you're not really listening to the conversation between him and his mum because it's, you only hear half of it and it's just, mum-son chat. But in through the window, you see this car kind of attempting to do a 3-point turn in this snowy car park, causing all sorts of absolute chaos, bedlam in the process. And then there's also people walking in front of the window, and there's other people moving into the language center, and the camera's actually static at this point. And it's an amazing sense of just there's multiple levels and depth of things going on, and they don't necessarily. It is a bit frivolous and farcical, but it adds a real sense of vitality into this filmmaking where things just do pop in, and it's almost got the kind of energy of, like a Chaplin or a Keaton, where things just kind of
true,
or even a Marx Brothers film where everything's moving at a slightly sped up pace, and people are just klutzing and bumbling into spaces. That's something he understands really well, and sometimes he uses that depth to extraordinary beauty. I mean, there's a great scene in Hands Up where the characters who are coated in plaster by this point, it's a very politically allegorical film, coated in plaster, and we see these candles very, very close up, and the camera kind of widens and pushes through and over these candles slightly, but they're still in the foreground.
And the candles are creating this kind of distortion through the shimmering
effects,
sort of like the desert or something.
Yeah, mirage. And then we see these characters slowly emerge, and they're framed kind of static against the boards of this hall, and the camera pans out, and the room is filled with candles. And it's an incredibly holy and reverential use of space and time, kind of sculpting in time, sculpting in space in a Tarkovskian sense. So he's perfectly capable. Moments before, they'd been dancing and singing, running in circles and pushing each other over and punching each other. So he's able to go from this very slapstick place to this very reverential and very holy place, at a snap of his fingers, and that's a remarkable thing. Like there's, he plays in this fun, silly register, and then will suddenly just, switch, and yeah.
Let's speaking of switches, let's pull out to see what that kind of hinge moment in his career is, where he, in my view, moves into making less exciting films. So the Polish era, Walkover, Identification Marks, Non-Barrier, and Hands Up, which of course Hands Up he actually completes and releases, including a very weird sci-fi intro filmed in Beirut
with Bruno Ganz.
And Jane Asher, and many other actors. Which he then releases in 1980.
81, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And but after that Polish era, he's exiled for the section of Hands Up, the most prominent section of Hands Up, the black and white section. It's not released. He then goes to France initially to do Le Départ. This was just like French new wave pastiche slapstick film, which is perfectly fun, but doesn't really break any.
Doesn't linger.
Break any records. And then he goes to he doesn't exactly go to London. He makes Deep End, which is mostly filmed in Munich. Pretty much every bit of it that you could possibly imagine not being filmed in London is filmed in Munich. There are some exteriors shot in London, and then the pool itself is a pool in London. But
yeah, it's that pool that I think they did a show about at the Whitechapel. That famous community pool. I think it's that pool. Like it was in Leytonstone, I think.
1970. No one died.
No one died.
It's not that pool. That's in Acton.
That's in Acton.
The day-to-day pool. So the Deep End. I'll just quickly summarize. Deep End. It's a sexual awakening film, set at least in London, starring Jane Asher and this young chap, John Mulder Brown. It has a terrific cameo from Diana Dawes, who an aging Diana Dawes who plays a patron of this baths where John Mulder Brown's character has got his first job. He's being sort of apprenticed by very hot and sexy Jane Asher, who is sort of telling him the ways. It's almost like he's sort of working in a brothel. He's sort of obliged to take tips for helping people to their baths, and then helping them to do other things.
Place.
And this is sort of alluded to. Meanwhile, he's a virgin, and he's kind of physically grappling with his feelings for Jane Asher. Jane Asher just is the nearest hot woman in his life.
She's older than him, but she's quite charismatic.
Yeah, she flirts with him.
Yeah, she leads.
There's an amazing improvised scene where she sort of like touches him a lot and kind of kisses him through this poster of a pregnant man, which is kind of a Saatchi publicity poster about about a sexual.
Yeah, what if you were a man but got pregnant?
Not sexual health. What is it?
Pregnancy.
Planned
Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood.
That's what we call it, yes.
Safe sex. Yeah. So Deep End, beautiful. I mean, the central idea, the central metaphor of going in at the deep end. This idea, the way that the pool is used. I mean, he has lost none of his visual inventiveness. The way the location of the pool is used, the way that this concept, this device of this engagement diamond that Jane Asher's character's boyfriend has got for her, that gets lost in the snow, and then they have to use this complicated sort of boiling water process to sort of like locate the diamond with her tights.
They shovel all the snow into some bags, take it to the pool. They rig a electric kettle to a lamp, and then create a kind of filtration system to try and locate it. It's an amazing Skolimowskian game, like I said earlier, setting up these kind of strange. There's obviously a much simpler way to have found this diamond, which was just to look in the snow for it, which is what I would have done.
No, I think they try that, and it doesn't.
They look for about 2 minutes. But
doesn't work
anyway,
out.
it's irrelevant to the logic of the film. It's an excuse to get them back into the swimming pool, this very symbolically charged place, because it is a place where there are underwater scenes that are quite dreamlike, where he swims and imagine he's swimming with her and they're naked. He steals a paper cutout from outside a bawdy house, a kind of brothel, and takes it to the pool and swims with this cardboard cutout, which then becomes underwater her real live body, Jane Asher's real life body. It's an amazing moment.
It's a beautifully it is just a perfect wet dream. It's a beautifully cinematically constructed way to convey the pain of unrequited adolescent desire. It's sexy and it's disturbing. And it's a strange, uncanny experience. And it's actually not, even though it does, in a way, now we talk about it, share things, the sense of temptation, the use of visual devices to kind of arouse and seduce the audience. We talk about this in Barrier. It does feel different. It does feel like a step towards more conventional filmmaking, because the stakes are now more kind of more clear, I guess.
The dialogue is perhaps less grounded in an immediate political, social context. It's more ordinary, the dialogue.
I mean,
it loses some of its kind of declarativeness, which is what
it's less surreal. It's maybe less zany, I suppose.
But it's also libidinally open. I think that's one of the things. Like, it's exciting to see a film like The Shout is also quite a libidinally open film as well. And I think that's one of the poisons of making a UK film, is that the UK has an abundance, is like Carry-On-esque sexuality, cheap, frivolous sexuality. And I think one of the great things about his early films in Poland is that there is a repression and a sense of shame. So a lot of his protagonists, there's often a woman, there's often a love interest in the films, and they flirt, but the male protagonist is often largely indifferent to this person. You know, he's kind of interested but isn't.
Not in Barrier. In Barrier, he's got the hots for this woman.
He has, but there's like maybe an embrace, maybe the implication.
And in Hands Up, they all look really horny for this woman, aren't they?
But there are embraces, but it's never really taken to the point of, it's never taken to coitus.
Yeah,
it's never taken to culmination. Whereas, film, The Shout and Deep End both kind of actually go the whole way. And I think that loss of, I guess, repression or shame, in a way, it kind of makes the films a little bit less interesting, a little bit less sublimated, a little bit less weird. I don't know. I don't think that's the reason why they kind of blow a bit. And like Deep End is a great film. It really is good, but it's never reaches. I think except in the pool scene when he dives. So we see this kind of high angle shot down at it's a high angle shot looking at slightly askance at the pool water. And he throws the cardboard cutout into it, and so it appears off screen, lands in the water, and is floating there. And there's a kind of purple tinge to the water, and then he dives in. It's an incredibly well composed and very beautiful shot. There
great
are
underwater
like
shots,
great underwater shots. But other parts of the film are shot a little bit indifferently, or they're just waving a camera around. There's
the greatest error of this film. The absolutely catastrophic use of contemporary popular music by Cat Stevens. The most galling aspect of this was watching the special features, where the editor, I don't know if he's any longer with us, but if he's listening, I hope he takes note. The editor says, quite often when using contemporary music in a film like this, it feels anachronistic and is deeply dated, but I don't feel like that happened in this case at all.
I think it does.
I don't think it has happened. It's ever happened more than in Deep End.
Yeah.
The absolutely and Scully obviously thought this was a good idea. He said it in interviews. But there's one of us will die tonight. Something like some horrible pop song being played
it's
during
like
the pivotal moment.
It's quite a bad Cat Stevens song. It's Cat Stevens in a kind of rocky 70s phase and moving away from a more folky infused work. It kind of doesn't fit, and it's like
is Cat Stevens good?
Cat Stevens is great, but it does Cat Stevens. Sorry, Yusuf Islam, I should say. It does Cat Stevens a disservice to be involved with this film, and it does Skolimowski a disservice to have this Cat Stevens track. It isn't a good fit.
No.
It feels jarring over the top of the film.
There should be like sensitivity readers for this sort of thing. There should like in the 70s there should have been like someone that you talk to just check. Yeah. Someone who actually knows about music to be like, am I just using this because it's like because I'm hearing it in shops a lot?
So if like,
or like,
how's that going to work with films now? Someone's like, maybe we shouldn't have like Bjork in this.
yeah,
Icelandic
someone
film
would
'cause
be
it's gonna-
someone would be like, hold on a minute, why are you using this?
It feels too.
This
You are watching a film now. This is the
Yeah,
introduction
yeah.
music to this film, which you're not going to hear during the film, but you're going to hear at the end. But either way, like, I think Deep End is there's elements of it where it verges on Carry On, but in a kind of interesting way, because you're kind of seeing
it's
a Carry
very
On.
camp.
It's very camp, and you're seeing a Carry On film through the lens.
But
of
I thought
a
Let
foreigner.
Apart was like a Carry On film as well. I mean, even there are Carry On elements of Hands Up, actually.
Yeah, Apart is just a new wave film. It's just like a kind of off-cut Godard film, or maybe Truffaut. Actually, it's a bit more Truffaut-y. It's like Shoot the Pianist.
Mhm.
It gives me Shoot the Pianist vibes. But yeah, there's this move outside of Poland. I think he was in a, I was watching an interview with him the other day, and he's very much like, he was a director. That was his skill, his wheelhouse. He acted a bit to kind of make money, but he was very much at the beck and call of what scripts were ever available to him, really, and so kind of had to make do. And I think with
What, in the 70s era, you think?
Yeah, in the 70s era. I mean, he said this.
Did he not
explicitly.
write the scripts himself?
He was involved, but he, the way it was much easier to make in Poland the films he wanted to make. He was a little bit the subject to production houses and commercial viability of projects, and perhaps a less well received tradition of avant-garde experimental new wave filmmaking. And it wasn't a thing in the UK. In the way it was. And it's interesting, he ended up in the UK, and I think maybe a natural home for him would have been France. But maybe France was too packed already with its own way of him really to make a splash.
Yeah, and I guess he spoke English. I don't know. There is
Well, he didn't that phase. So he talked during this interview. So he hung out with Fellini, at Cinecittà, in his famous like studios in Italy. And he had lunch with Fellini, and a couple other people, and he said he regrets this encounter because he said he didn't speak English at that point, or spoke it very, very badly. So he couldn't really interact with the great man himself. So it is interesting that he wasn't really an English speaker, but ended up making films. But by the 80s, he spoke competent English.
But he makes The Shout, which is just a crude and ridiculous folk horror film.
Yeah.
With occasional exciting touches, but
There's
with
a couple
this
of
like
bits that I kind of like about this deeply silly film.
It's a deeply silly film with a stupid concept and like quite an entertaining Alan Bates performance, because Alan Bates is always great.
Really bad John Hurt performance, actually.
Really weak. Well, like, John Hurt is. There's one moment, one little
Hurt
Easter egg in John Hurt. Obviously, John Hurt was a homosexual. There is an amazing moment.
I'm hearing this for the first time only now.
There's an amazing moment where he's in a bath, sharing a bath with
his wife,
the leading lady of the film, whose name is Susanna York.
Yeah,
and he's sort of. I just never seen a man be kind of less into.
Yeah,
like
Susanna York could be very attractive.
Their bodies are like together, and he just sort of looks. He looks like he's trying to help her across the road or something.
He has to get out of the bath because someone calls through the window, and the look of relief on John's face
he's like,
is
I don't have to
palpable.
be in this bath with this woman's body. He's obviously gagging for some dick.
Actually, there's an amazing part of there's incidental parts of The Shout which are great. So for absolutely no reason whatsoever, really, John Hurt's character is an experimental
he's
musician.
a Cafe Otto guy.
He's a
Yeah.
Cafe
There's
Otto
loads
guy.
of Otto moments.
So there's he has this great studio where
playing
he's
with
just
his knobs.
playing with his knob.
Wishing he could play with someone else.
Yeah. Simmer down. So he's basically none of that. This is a family program. He has like this
Wasn't
amazing.
last week.
Yeah, last week was different. That was dark YouTube. But he has this amazing studio setup where he kind of is doing Foley and using lots of reverb and echo effects to kind of produce interesting Foley sounds, and it's not really clear why the fuck he's doing this or who's commissioning to do it, whatever. It was a 70s baby. And yeah, it's those elements are shot really interestingly, almost in a Bressonian way, kind of focus the way that the objects are framed and the adoration, devotion to objects and hands doing things. I enjoyed those bits the most. I could have happily just watched that for like 2 hours and I would have been like pleased as punch, honestly. But the wider film is so farcical, but not in a good farcical way, like in the way that Hands Up is farcical and is really biting.
It's farcical in an Ennis Main way.
Yeah, and it's like so. I think the icing on the cake is this fucking cricket hut that explodes comically at the end. Tim Curry gets flung over the cricket pitch.
He gets turned into a curry.
He does, doesn't he?
And then then Hands Up. Then he does this strange sci-fi introduction to Hands Up, the film he made during his good era.
Yeah.
Which kind of it's shot in Beirut. There are some amazing, beautiful shots in it, and this Penderecki
plane landing.
This very histrionic Penderecki music kind of does the trick. But the whole concept is him trying to kind of create an almost like a sort of led by donkey style kind of sort of but posturing
and he
statement.
would lead by donkeys with the EO.
Yeah, true. Very good, very good. A sort of posturing metaphor for his own exile.
Yeah, it's him trying to intellectualize it.
It is very FPV, using all these kind of London actors to sort of tell his sob story, which was deeply irritating. And then he does Moonlighting, which I haven't seen, but it's Jeremy Irons playing a Polish builder.
Would you have sex with your dog? Would you have sex with your son?
I'm not against casting Jeremy Irons.
No, Jeremy Irons is a great actor.
He's fantastic in Inland Empire, but I would say that every time he's well cast, it's because he's a deeply odd man.
He's not well cast. He just happens to be playing Jeremy Irons in film.
And I think it doesn't look like I shouldn't talk about films I haven't seen, but it doesn't look like he's particularly well cast.
I don't think Moonlighting is particularly good. But this thing that is an interesting thing about him working with quite extreme actors. I know we're supposed to be focusing on the early films, but in 2010 he makes Essential Killing
with Vincent Gallo.
Remember him?
Gallo's Humour.
And it's an extraordinary vehicle. It has a very wobbly opening 10-15 minutes framing narrative, but the actual body of the film itself is a survival story of Vincent Gallo against the elements, trying to survive. It's extraordinarily beautifully shot, a real return to form for Skolimowski as a filmmaker's filmmaker. It's very the cinematography is extraordinary in a snowbound landscape. There's some amazing moments of real heightened absurdity and blocking, which is consistent with early Skolimowski, of these chase scenes and dog fighting scenes. I think it's absolutely extraordinary film, and I think in many ways is typical of that. Skolimowski is best when someone is on a kind of vague but fraught hero's journey going from one place to another. He's a journeyman, literally, like in EO kind of does that because it is the journey of a donkey through a series of tableaux. But obviously the didacticism of EO probably lets it down a bit because you're very much learning this is a film about the cruelty of man to man and man to animal.
Yeah, which I think
which lets it down. Obviously, we talked about that.
It feels cruel to compare EO to O Hazard Balthazar, which I think Skolimowski himself would be the first to admit is a far superior film. Although I think Skolimowski has a strange kind of arrogance, so maybe not. But
that's why I like him.
Filmmakers are, I think most filmmakers worth their salt have a certain reverence to Bresson.
He would have escaped this whole conundrum if he'd
just been a different animal. Yeah, it's so true.
Or anything, literally.
Because it is quite a different film in lots of ways. And what's so important about O Hazard Balthazar, which I saw recently at the BFI again, is that it's not about the fucking animal. I mean, the animal becomes a surface through which we understand all these different relations between people.
Yeah. The little girl, the schoolmaster, family, everyone like that.
And it's kind of a device that Bresson is constantly trying to tell human relation with. Now this is a Bresson pod, but but Bresson is constantly trying to tell human relations through things that aren't quite human relations, and he makes
objects and
through objects, exactly, yeah.
Objects, objet.
And the donkey and O Hazard Balthazar, the donkey, kind of helps us to look indirectly at humans, and then
through a glass darkly.
And then he sort of, but in a way, even though it is one of my favorite Bresson films, I feel that he later on with Mouchette and Une Femme Douce, he sort of then builds up the courage to just make films about people.
Yeah. I love Une Femme Douce. I love L'Argent. I'm a huge L'Argent head, actually.
We haven't ever podded about Bresson.
I don't think I could pod about Bresson.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
it's one of them. Like, we haven't podded about Tarkovsky. I think an Une Femme Douce pod is
we'd have to look at Bresson because indirectly.
Yeah.
Actually, we'd have to look at an off-cut. We'd have to look at Lancelot du Lac or something. We'd have to look at him not through the obvious.
Well, Une Femme Douce is far from an off-cut. It's my favorite Bresson film.
Yeah, but it's not one of the.
It's not canonical.
It's not Pickpocket. It's not Man Escaped. All of the kind of overdetermined Bresson films that people think of as being canonical of Bresson. Yeah. But yeah, back to Skolimowski. I think there's the early films have a frisson, a fizziness, a kind of, I suppose, through amateurism, but also through a real expert knowledge of framing and blocking, composition, of time, of space, an ability to concoct quite insane, surreal, and yet very naturalistic studies of youth, longing, desire, and drifting, which is the main thing, and it's obviously it was in the water of the 60s anyway, of this generation, but this was all leading up to the boiling point of 68, which is when he reaches his own kind of deflation, I suppose, in the same way that the student movement of the 60s of May reached its own point of deflation, I suppose. And I think there's something very sexy and very cool about Jerzy Skolimowski in the 60s, which isn't echoed in, it may only be 4 or 5 films, really 4, but I haven't seen any other filmmaker produce that quality and interest and excitement for me. I don't think anyone else,
such short succession.
Yeah, Godard maybe, but Godard's a whole different plane. Like, because Godard was just way more.
Godard was an ideas man, and
ranging,
and Godard was more of a craftsman. I feel like if you compare Image Book to EO in terms of old man films, old man auteur films, like edgy, still got it. Old man.
Well, he made fucking Le Mépris. Got in the 60s, he went from the space of making Bout de Soufflé to Le Mépris, which is the film of a 70-year-old man. Like, Le Mépris is an absolute goddamn masterpiece, but it was made by a literal apprentice filmmaker, effectively.
He matured incredibly quickly, and he had the tools and the environment to.
But Skolimowski never found his Le Mépris.
But Skolimowski also had to leave Poland, and I don't want to be.
He took the walk from
Poland, and it lost it somewhere. There's something I don't want to say that he didn't, because he did make Deep End, which was great, although it's got this weird sort of clunkiness to it, but it is it's okay. It's a fabulous. It's okay because it's so fabulously constructed. Yeah. But there is something about him in his Poland years that is just, for me. Yeah. He never achieves that again. And I don't mean to say that means that everyone should stay where they came from, but I think there is some something that, at least for him, he could access there in the Polish tradition, and it's why we like a lot of Polish films. It's punching way above its weight as a country cinematically in the 20th century. And
there's a real respect for the avant-garde, I think, in Poland, in a way that even in France, the
avant-garde infuses everything. Yeah, in a way that it doesn't.
From poster design to film, and I think there's something, even in France, like the new wave in France is so spectacularly influential because it used the language and tropes of Hollywood. Yeah. And Moscow, Hollywood, Moscow Film Complex, whatever. But it used those languages, like the great, as it were, avant-garde films of France are really Hollywood films. And the actual avant-gardists of that period, people like, he's Swiss, but Alain Tanner, Jean-Daniel Paulet, people like that were unable to, and René maybe were, and languished a bit. It sounds weird to say that someone like René languished, but he wasn't elevated in a way that the actual, Cahir new wave were, because he was, not using this kind of more conventional, more accessible language. But I think I really respect the Polish, and particularly Skolimowski's approach to making really experimentally avant-garde films that are still fun as fuck to watch. I think.
On that note, on the note of fun, I think I think that's about it on Skolimowski. I think so. There's good news around Skolimowski. We've alluded to it earlier. All 4 of these films are this year being released on Blu-ray in the UK. This means there will be high quality copies of the most recent restorations out there in the world. released by the BFI in the case of identification marks none and Hands Up, and second run.
Yeah, and a lot of these films are currently on BFI
releasing
Player, actually.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah. Hands Up isn't yet on BFI Player. It's coming in May, I
Okay.
believe, early May. I think the 6th or 7th of May. But all the other films, I think a good number of the other films we talked about today, including Essential Killing.
The latest collies are all
there. All there. EO's there, but some of these early ones are there as well. Identification Marks None is certainly on Mubi in the UK. So yeah, fill your boots. I think I don't think there's any other housekeeping. We don't do this thing sometimes where we promise to do a future episode about somebody and then we don't do that episode, like our non-existent
Husha episode
podcast, which lives in our heads. But
there's plenty ahead. There is the BFI Film Festival, which
I think we'd like to
we're
cover.
going to cover in some fashion. But we will be back. We will be so back. There are so many films still to talk about.
So many. Please stop making them.
I think we might actually do a review of Jean Dillman.
Yeah. What is the Dillman?
And that might balloon into an Ackerman. But no, I think maybe we'll just...
No, we keep it. There's so much to say about Jean Dillman.
Alluding, of course, to its placement last year in the Sight and Sound list. And then I think, as we said earlier, maybe une femme douce Bresson kind of special.
Getting very French language, actually.
We have probably done more French films than any other nation.
We really need to decolonize our curriculum, don't we?
I don't think so.
We've not done Virus Ethical or Love Diaz, the two filmmakers from the global south that actually exist.
No, but we have done Manny Cow.
Where's our Edward Yang episode?
I didn't like Yi that much.
Yi.
And I can't be bothered to watch Bright Summer Day. Although I will. I've got it on Blu-ray, so I will watch it.
What about Pickpocket?
Oh, the other Pickpocket, yes.
Yeah.
By our
maybe not Edward Yang. Sorry, we're just gabbling on.
You're just saying Asian people's names. No, I there are many directors I'd like to do from many parts of the world.
They go to a different school. That's the problem. They're really fit. Really fit.
Yeah. Lav Diaz is an enormous undertaking. Virus Ethical, actually, I am not that keen on.
See, this is where Ralph is wrong, and that's why we should do an episode about Virus Ethical, because obviously
I do like it.
He's probably one of the greatest living filmmakers.
I do like him, but I don't get it.
You don't get it?
I don't
That's
get
such a Philistinic.
I don't get this insane obsession with Virus Ethical. I don't find myself bewitched by the sort of...
Have you seen Mysterious Object at Noon?
Is that the black and white one?
Yeah, the first
I
one.
fell asleep during it.
But
that's the point. That's the point.
He wants you to fall asleep.
That's the point. Yeah, exactly.
That's what.
No, it was very beautiful, but it didn't.
More than beautiful. It's invigorating. It's the liminal space between the spirit and the physical world. It's extraordinary. You have to let yourself sink into it, and then you can prepare yourself for a Lav Diaz evolution of a Filipino family for 18 hours. A day well spent.
No, I wouldn't deny that for a second. Yeah, maybe. Well, the next episode, Educating Ralph.
Decolonizing Ralph.
On Virus Ethical will follow, no doubt.
All right, peace out.
Bye-bye.